Why does no one talk about Scale 75 anymore? In the 2010s, Scalecolor enjoyed great popularity, especially among pro-level painters. However, all I hear from Scale lately is one Kickstarter after another to stay afloat. I wonder if Scale 75 can keep up with all the newer paint ranges and the advancements they brought in covering power and formulation. To answer this question, I'm testing the entire Scalecolor, Fantasy & Games and Metal & Alchemy ranges from the perspective of today in this video. Hi, I'm Stahly from Tale of Painters, and on my channel I put the latest miniature paints to the test. Many of you have asked when I'll finally cover Scale 75. Well, the time has come. For this video I went out and bought all three of Scale's core ranges: Scalecolor, Fantasy & Games and Metal & Alchemy. Over 130 colors in total, and I have thoroughly tested them all. These paints have been around for over a decade, but can they keep up with modern paint lines like Puro Cruel, Warpaint's Fanatic and the updated Vallejo Game & Model colors? Let's find out in this video. As I hinted in the intro, the Spanish paint manufacturer Scale 75 has been launching one Kickstarter after another, including their drop-in paint airbrush range and the brand new Scalecolor games. If you'd like me to review those as well, drop a comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. Relying so heavily on crowdfunding cash flow can turn into a vicious cycle, as we've seen with other tabletop and board game companies. Not long ago, Scale 75's CEO even posted an open letter on Instagram addressing the challenges the company is facing. Let's hope they pull through. It would be a shame to lose them. Now onto the review. I've got all the three core ranges paints here. We'll start with Scalecolor, then move on to the Fantasy & Games line, and finally we'll take a deep dive into the metallics from the Metal & Alchemy range. And you want to stick around for that, because there are some truly unique metallic colors in there. The Scalecolor range may be relatively small at just 63 acrylic paints, but it offers something unique that not a lot of other paint ranges can do. More on that in a moment. First, let's take a look at the bottles. These are standard 17ml dropper bottles, no agitator, but unlike other brands, you'll need to pierce the nozzle yourself with a sharp object. Price-wise, Scalecolor sits above competitors like Warpaint's Fanatic or Vallejo, but remains cheaper per milliliter than Citadel. Outside of Europe, they might be a bit harder to find. The paint has a good consistency, neither too thick nor too thin, and holds up well on a wet palette. The application feels slightly gel-like, and the self-leveling properties aren't quite as forgiving as more modern ranges like Puro Cruel, Too Thin Coats or Ionic, which have more flow improver added. This means you'll need to take extra care to avoid visible brush strokes, as the working time is average. The bright colors are highly pigmented with excellent saturation and intensity. However, this comes at the cost of covering power. The brighter colors tend to be quite transparent. This issue isn't limited to the usual suspects like yellow, orange and red. Even bright greens and blues struggle with opacity. The darker colors are fine, but to fully enjoy the Scalecolor range you need to like working with semi-transparent layers and prefer vibrancy over coverage. They're great for feathered blendings and, thanks to their pigment purity, also ideal for glazing, as they thin down really nicely without breaking. This also makes them decent for airbrushing. Just bear in mind that airbrush thinner can change the finish. Even though the paint range is quite small, one of the biggest strengths of this range is the color palette. There are the vibrant colors I mentioned, but also moody colors you don't find as much in other ranges, like deep purples, cloudy blues and dusky grays. Moody is indeed the word that best describes the palette. I'd recommend picking a few colors from the range to get a feel for how they paint before you commit to a full set. I've created an accurate hand-painted swatch for Scalecolor, in which you can see exactly how the colors will look on the model, and there are also icons that tell you the covering power and highlight extra vibrant colors. This way, you can find exactly the colors you need for your next project. Feel free to check out my Patreon if you're interested. But there is one more thing about Scalecolor that is special, another unique feature that no other paint range can match. The finish. Scalecolor is ultra matte, the mattest miniature paint you can find. Here's a comparison with the already matte Pro Cruel and Vallejo model color, and Scalecolor is noticeably more flat. However, be aware that this extreme mattness makes the paints quite delicate. They rub off easily, even the oils from your fingers can leave marks, just as with ultra matte varnishes. And that's exactly what makes it difficult for me to give a score for the Scalecolor range. The ultra matte finish makes Scalecolor unique, but it also has its drawbacks, just like the vibrant pigments that result in poor covering power. 6.5 would be a bit too harsh, considering the palette has so many beautiful colors, so that's why I'm giving Scalecolor a solid 7. Depending on your preferences and paint style, your mileage may vary. Now let's take a look at the Fantasy and Games range, because it differs fundamentally from the Scalecolor range in one key aspect. First, the Blue Cap Fantasy and Games palette is even smaller with only 48 colors. At first, the paints feel very similar in consistency and painting properties to the sister range, but there is one key difference. It's not the consistency or vibrancy though, those are on the same level. And just as with Scalecolor, you need to look out for visible brush strokes. The pigments are also pure and vibrant, which again comes at the expense of covering power. The big difference, however, is the finish. Where Scalecolor is ultra matte, the Fantasy and Games paints have a satin finish, similar to Citadel and Warpaint's Fanatic. Perhaps even a bit more so, though not quite as satin glossy as P3. This provides more durability, as the glossier paint is, the smoother it is on a microscopic level, making it more resistant to external influences. The satin finish also boosts the depth of the colors. If you compare 48 colors to other competitor ranges like AK 3rd Gen and Vallejo Model Color, which each have over 200 colors, it's obvious that the Fantasy and Games range must have some gaps. There seems to be more of an emphasis on vibrant colors, while bone and sand tones are completely missing. So you'll need to start mixing or supplement the range with paints from other brands. Feel free to check out my Patreon, as in addition to the Scalecolor chart, I have super accurate hand-painted swatches for all major miniature paint brands, as well as a huge 7-in-1 document with over 1,100 neatly arranged color squares. So the Fantasy and Games paints are more for people who like to work with transparent paints, for example for blending and glazing. The covering power does seem to be a bit weaker across the board, and they also lack the unique selling point of the ultra matte finish. So I would lean towards a 6.5 rather than a 7 for the Fantasy and Games range, especially when compared to the many newer paint ranges. By the way, at the time of this video, Scale 75 is shipping its new Scalecolor Games range from Kickstarter. I'm curious to see how this expands or replaces the Fantasy and Games range. From what I've heard, they have a more matte finish. If you already have these paints, please share your experiences in the comments and let me know if you would like to see a review on this channel. Now let's move on to the metallics, and I can already tell you that these are my favorite Scalecolor range. Let me tell you why. With 24 colors, the Metal and Alchemy line offers a really broad selection of metallic hues. While there aren't as many silvers and steels, there are plenty of gold, bronze and copper tones to choose from, especially when it comes to more realistic brownish golds and bronzes. There are also some colorful, candy-colored metallics. The consistency of the Metal and Alchemy paints, like the other scale ranges, is very even and uniform. Unfortunately, I couldn't find out whether the paints use aluminum or mica flakes. However, the particles are very fine and provide a smooth finish that's slightly more matte than, for example, Citadel color metallics with their larger, more glittery particles. The covering power varies. The darker colors cover very well in 2 thin coats, the midtones and golds need 3 to 4, and because of their nature, the light and candy colored metallics need even more than that. For highlighting and layering, that's okay, but for base coating, I would rather reach for the airbrush when using the brighter metallics. Also, keep in mind that the candy metallics are quite pastel and silvery and not quite as intensely tinted as the colored metallics from the 2 thin coats range, for example. So I would say that overall the metal and alchemy paints don't quite match up to Vallejo Mecha and Metal Color or standout colors like Retributor Armor from Games Workshop, but they're close. That's why I give them a solid 7.5 with a tendency to 8 for some staples like Decayed Metal, Necro Gold, Viking Gold, Black Metal and Thrash Metal, which are so good they deserve a place in any collection. Now we come back to the initial question of how good old Scalecolor fares compared to more modern paint ranges. I would say the range does show its age. Newer paint ranges tend to have better covering power and more forgiving self-leveling properties, making them more accessible to a wider range of hobbyists. However, Scalecolor still has its place. The saturated colors, fantastic dilution capabilities and ultramatte finish can be quite appealing, especially if you tend to paint with more transparent layers anyway. I like to think of Scale 75 as a boutique brand. You go for them when you're looking for something special you can't find elsewhere, and for that you forgive them the odd shortcoming. And if you're not sure where to start now, my hand-painted swatch can help you out. And if you're looking for more special colors for your next project, then you have to watch my top 10 Pure Cruel paints here on the right, which are a must-have for any paint collection. Thanks a lot and happy hobbying!